don't sleep on these resources. Like, sometimes you do need something a little more basic to break down concepts for you, so feel free to use these books. They're not judging you. They're probably really happy to be off of the shelf, so use them. Hi everyone, I'm Tatiana, a naturalist and educator here on Teachings by Tatiana, and today I want to take you through some of my favorite books that have supported me on my learning journey. For me personally, I have a little bit of background education-wise on the environment, so I've taken ecology classes, botany classes, general biology, and so forth. But what I've really loved is taking a step further and trying to learn different aspects about plants and the environment that relate to culture, to people, and in a way also look for resources that dumb things down for me, because that is a way I can better understand things and then share that information with you all. So we'll go through some of my favorites, and if you have any that you really love that you want to share, please comment below any resources that you have really loved in your learning journey, and I'll take you through some of mine from my personal collection and we'll dig right into it. So let's get started. Something I want to mention too before I get into all the books is that I think using these books paired with going to some classes, workshops, hikes by people in your community is going to make your learning that much better. Learning from other people, hearing their stories and how they explain things might be of benefit to you. But I think this would be a really great starting point, because really through my learning journey, it started from books and then I've taken it beyond. So if you have the opportunity to go learn from somebody else, definitely try to do that. I teach classes in and around Miami about South Florida ecology and with an emphasis on botany and plants. So, plug there, but there's so many other great resources. Check out your libraries, check out, like local, what are they called? Like colleges and universities, sometimes they have one-off events. But do not underestimate the power of you going out into nature yourself. It can be intimidating, it is kind of overwhelming sometimes, especially if it's in a place you've never been to before. So while I do really encourage you to get out there and take that step forward for yourself, it can be really daunting. So, hopefully these books can kind of give you a foundation to work off of. But if you're really daring and just want to take one of these books, sit at your local park and see what you can discover, I think that would be a really beautiful thing. So, with your learning journey, I think when I think about learning myself as an individual, not as an educator necessarily, I really have to set my expectations aside and just be free to learn and to explore and to be curious. It's okay if you make mistakes, if you identify the wrong thing, you get confused and mistake one species for another, that's totally fine. Nobody's giving you a test at the end of it. You don't have to present on what you've learned. Give yourself some grace. I'm saying this because I'm talking to myself through this video too. Like, learning should be fun. I think it's really fun. You can make it a very enjoyable experience. So, hopefully with these tips and tricks, you can kind of get a feel for what to expect if you do something like this on your own. So, all that to say is that I believe in you. I hope this is a stepping stone, and I'm just so excited to nerd out about these books because I literally use these books all the time, whether I'm preparing for a workshop that I'm leading, whether I'm developing curriculum and I forget the definition of certain terms. It's okay to not know it all. You have resources to help you. And again, reach out to your community members who might be interested in learning the same thing as you, or maybe have some information that they can share. I think that's a really beautiful thing for me personally about being in this line of work, is that there's so much information and stories to be shared. It doesn't all happen indoors, it happens with people. So long introduction, but we'll get into it. So the first on my list here is my beloved Audubon Field Guide to Florida. So this is specific to Florida because that is where I live. But if you like to travel or if you find yourself in a different area, there are books like these for so many different regions of the world and so many different topics. So whether you want to just focus on general ecology of one location or dive into birds or to plants, specifically bugs, that's a whole other can of worms that is not my forte, you have the opportunity to do that. And what I really like about these field guides is that they're small, they're compact, jam-packed with so much information, so you can really have it all at your fingertips. It takes some practice to sort of understand the language of how people describe things. You'll grow to understand. In some pages, it'll say something like 30 inches, shrub to small tree with open spreading crown, leaves 2.5 inches, oblanceolate, which is a type of leaf description, to elliptical, toothed, bark grayish. So this is not really gonna sound like something you understand the first time around, and it's okay if you have to read it a few times. Descriptions of plants can be pretty detailed, but it can be kind of interesting to make it make sense to you. So this is, I think, a really great resource if you're actually outside in nature, you're on a hike, you're doing a walk around your neighborhood, you hear or see something, you can dive into this book and try to figure out what you're looking at. And it's a really good first step. The next couple books, I feel like they go hand in hand for me because I refer to them usually at the same time, and this is mostly when I'm trying to develop curriculum. So it is Dictionary of Nature by David Burnie, and these are one of those DK books. So this one is really beautiful. I really love this book because this is written at a really kind of baseline level. So if you are not super familiar with a lot of terminology, oh my gosh, I just flipped over to the page I had bookmarked. So there's some really beautiful illustrations in here. I love how everything is kind of broken down. So for example, on this page where it's talking about fruits, it breaks it down between the types of fruits, seed dispersal, follicles, which is a dry fruit that opens on one side. There's a lot of great information in here, and this particular resource is all about nature, so it's not just plants, it's about animals, insects, and everything in between. So I really love this resource when you're trying to just break it down and remember what is a drupe. For example, the next book I really love, again, that I use in tandem a lot, I am a huge dictionary person. My mom was firmly one of those people who was like, you're not going to be playing video games, here's an encyclopedia. So I have such a big love for dictionaries and encyclopedias because those were the books I was reading as a kid. And this is another really lovely resource, which is the American Heritage Student Science Dictionary. And this one has a lot of visuals to it, but it's mostly a dictionary, so it's a little bit different than the one I just showed you. But what I love about this resource is that it's arranged in alphabetical order, and that's really helpful for me sometimes because when I'm really confused and trying to figure out the word for something, like, I don't know, let's say I forget what photosynthesis is like, you can easily just pop over to the page and find what you're looking for. And again, this resource is a little bit general, so this is of like science in general, so it goes into so many other disciplines like chemistry, ecology, and of course botany, astronomy, all the beautiful things I love to read about. And just because it might look like it says it's for students, and for example me, I've been graduated for quite some time, don't sleep on these resources. Like, sometimes you do need something a little more basic to break down concepts for you, so feel free to use these books. They're not judging you. They're probably really happy to be off of the shelf, so use them. The next book I'll mention is my holy grail book, and I have to admit, this resource didn't become fully useful to me until I really understood my personal relationship to plants, if that makes sense, because the Botanical Bible by Sonya Patel Ellis is literally a Bible for me. But this is really such a beautiful collection. Oh, look at all my sticky notes. This is really a beautiful collection of plants from A to Z, and not in a dictionary way, but let me just give you a snippet of the table of contents here, because it's really such a beautiful resource. So it starts from the story of plants and flowers, goes through botany for beginners, growing and gathering, botanical recipes and remedies, so actually the uses of different plants, and then it has inspired by nature, so art forms in nature. How did I open to my favorite leaf? Like, this book speaks to me, and there's such great information on here. The one thing I would like to mention though about some of these resources that may highlight cultural uses or like recipes, remedies, things like that, is to consider where you are in the world. While I have really enjoyed learning about ethnobotanical or the way humans use plants, oftentimes I have found that they're using plants that do not grow in my area. I'm in South Florida. So for example, echinacea, or purple cone flower, is such a beautiful, medicinal, powerful plant that is widely used for, building immunity when you're sick. But here in South Florida, that plant doesn't grow here. From a sense of sourcing these materials and ingredients, it's better just to go local, in my opinion, or just buy remedies that may have these plants that don't grow in your area, but are properly produced and sourced and made to heal you in the process. Might be something to consider. Again, on the train of dictionaries, I can't believe I have just 3 in this collection here, but this is another really beautiful resource, the Visual Dictionary of Plants, and I'm going to include all of the titles and authors in the description in case you want to look these up for yourself. But really, I love about this resource in this case, because this is such a large work, like physically, is the detail in the visuals that you have here. I oftentimes try to identify things mostly by sight, because of course that's the easiest thing to do, because it's just like bam, right in front of you. So having a resource like this to try to give you that exposure of like, oh look, different kinds of fruits again, and how they grow in each step of the process, and what each layer is called. You're not going to use this perhaps in your everyday life, but it's really cool to have a visual and to get the actual terminology for what these different parts of a plant are. I have also found myself, because I am a plant nerd, is that people will say, oh, there's a flower there, but where does the fruit come from? And if everyone maybe was a little more connected to nature like I am, they would understand that when a flower blooms, pollination can happen, and then that's when this whole fertilization process happens, where pollen goes down into the ovary of a flower and then can develop that fruit. But that's just because I took the time to learn this, and it's fascinating. But a resource like this can really help you understand that process. I'm mentioning a lot of these resources, but that's not to say I've read these cover to cover. I have not. I'm going to tell you right now, I do not. I use them as references and resources. So I quickly skim through to try to find the information that I'm looking for, or if something catches my eye, like right now I'm looking at this dry fruits page and kind of freaking out because look how beautiful this is. I don't know this information verbatim. I could not do a reading comprehension test about this unless I really took the time to process the information, but it's good quick reference if you need some clarity or you need a better understanding of whatever it is you're curious about. That's what these books are for. But I wanted to make a mention of one book that I have here in my collection, which is Palms and Flowers of Florida. And this is a tiny resource. As you can see, it is a really interesting kind of like little pamphlet. It seems like it was a part of like a subscription or kind of series of books from back in the day. And the reason I bring up this resource is because you might tell it doesn't look as modern as some of the other books. I wanted to talk about some places where you can get some of these books. You don't always have to buy them new. Some of these books I have found at garage sales, at thrift stores. I like to buy my books off of thrift books if I'm getting them online. So over the years I've kind of like collected these books, but this one in particular I found at a flea market, and I have such an interest in it because it has some really quaint visuals, kind of in an old-timey way, and some small descriptions. But remember I said this is a little bit older in publication, and it was published in 1940, which is such a long time ago. And that's not to say that this book is not a good resource, is of value, but I do emphasize as much as possible, at least double check the information that you find in older publications like this. Double checking the information of the books that are in here is going to be really important. Science changes over the years, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Sometimes it can be frustrating because you'll come to learn that one plant you thought of is now in a different category of family or genus, which is fine. It happens, and I'm so glad there are people out there in the world who can do that work. I do really emphasize that you double check what is in these books so you can make sure you're learning the most up-to-date information. And last but not least, I have such a beautiful resource that I personally love for me in particular, because as you can see, visuals are really important to me. And learning the terminology, learning the intricacies of how plants work is not for the faint of heart. But this botany coloring book is such a great find. And there are others of these kinds of coloring books. This is by Paul Young. And this really helped me a lot when I was taking an introductory botany course, because as you may have seen in some of the other images in here, there's a lot going on. It kind of breaks down different terminology, different species, and it'll show you its life cycle, and it has all the like main terminology here that you can also color in and kind of practice, put into context. This could be a really fun way just to be an introduction. You don't need to take a course. It is a little bit grueling and challenging, but this could be something really fun to do, on and off. This is, again, no tests, no grades being assigned, something fun you can do on your own time and have a little fun by adding color to it, because that is relaxing. So I hope you found this video informative. I do a lot of plant identification workshops in and around Miami. South Florida is the flora I'm most familiar with. So if you want to learn from me, you can take one of my hikes or take one of my classes or workshops, and you can go down to my website, Teachings by Tatiana. to learn more about any next upcoming learning opportunities, but I want to share a lot more on this channel about my tips and tricks for the learning process. So stay tuned for future episodes. If there's anything you want to learn a little bit more about, plant-related, ecology, nature-wise, let me know that as well. I'd love to explore other topics. This is just scratching the surface. We're starting really simple here. And if there's anything out of this list that you like, as a reminder, I'm going to include all the information below so you can explore it at your own pace. And if you do try any of these books, I really hope that you find them helpful. And as always, I am rooting for your growth, and I really thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.